So you've gone through the process. You've edited your file, you've scrubbed through your project and decided this is something I want to share with the world. Then you're ready to use the render queue. The render queue in After Effects gives you the ability to create self-contained files outside of After Effects. And so that obviously makes it pretty easy to share. Now, in order to add something to the render queue, you need to make sure you're in the right composition. So in the bottom of my timeline panel here, I'm just going to make sure that my training swoosh timeline is active. And then I'm going to go up under Composition and choose Add to Render Queue. Once you add the file to the render queue, you should see this pop up in the bottom of your interface. Now, just so we can see things more clearly, I'm going to reposition this panel right over top of my composition panel. So if you click these little grippy things to the left of the word render, you can click and drag, and I'm just holding my mouse button down, and you want to make sure you get a purple bar up here at the top that just goes across the composition panel. Once you have that, our render queue is top dead center in the middle of our interface. Now, as I'm looking at this, there are three main options for creating the file. The first one you should look at is over here under Output To. Now, mine says Training Swoosh. Yours may say no destination yet, or not assigned yet, or not yet assigned, or something like that. If you click on those words, you can specify where you'd like to render that file. Now, I'm just going to render mine right to my exercise files folder. Now, notice it named the file, or it assumed that you want to name the file the same name as your composition. Now, I know this bumper was called Training Day 1, so I'm just going to rename Swoosh Day 1, making sure to leave the training underscore on there. Now, I've named my file. I've chosen where I want to save it. I can click Save. The two other main setting areas are the render settings and the output module. So the render settings, if we click on the words Best Settings, this is where you can specify how large the file is going to be in terms of its pixel dimensions. By default, it'll render full size based on whatever your composition was set at. Mine was set at 1280 by 720, so that's what it's going to render at. Now, down here in the time sampling section, if you go to the right side, there's a custom button. This would allow you to change a different duration if you only wanted to render, say, the first 5 seconds of your project. You could click Custom here and then choose a different ending, say 500. I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to click Cancel. You can always just give a quick glance to make sure it's going to start at 0 and end at your last frame, giving you a total duration that matches your comp. Now, if you click OK, it'll set that as your best settings. Now, the output module here is set to lossless. Now, on the Mac, that means a QuickTime file. In Windows, most likely it's a Windows Media file. You can click on the arrow to the left of this setting and choose other preset settings. I could render to a Flash video file or a Flash 4 video file, but I'm going to leave mine set to lossless. If you click on the word lossless, we get a couple different options. Under Format, for me, again, I'm on a Mac, it's going to say QuickTime. I could choose an image sequence or some other setting if I wanted, but I'll just leave it set to QuickTime. Now, output video is where I can specify whether I want to render just the RGB or whether I want to render it with an alpha channel. An alpha channel we don't have because that was a full screen graphic, so we can leave the default setting of RGB. Over here under Format Options, I could choose a different codec. Animation is a very good codec to render if you're rendering for QuickTime files because animation is automatically included on any system that has QuickTime Player, Mac or PC. Down here at the bottom, we could specify if we want to render with audio or not. By default, it will render with audio if your comp has it, but if it doesn't have it, it won't render the audio. So I usually just leave this at its default settings and then click OK. Now, to render your file, all you have to do is click the button over here in the upper right corner, click Render. Once you do that, you should see a progress bar changing along here. Now, it may take a few seconds to initialize if you've queued up multiprocessor rendering. As it's rendering here, you'll see what frame it's on, how much time it's taken, and an estimate of how much longer it's going to take. If you need to have more space so you can read all these words, you could resize the render queue before you hit the render. But this one's going rather quickly, so I'm going to leave it the way it was set. When it's finished, it'll give you a render time. That only took 36 seconds for my system to render. So I'm going to jump into my Finder here and navigate to my exercise files folder on my desktop. In here, there we have our training day 1 video file. If we double click, you'll see we have our full resolution file, and I can go ahead and play that and watch what our file actually looks like. So there you have it. When you're finished with your project and you want to share it with the world, just make sure you have the right composition selected in your After Effects project, then go up under Composition and add it to the render queue. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and click Render and your file will be created.